My dear mother-in-law, I don't believe it. It can't have happened. Jesus has been arrested. If only I'd stayed awake. Would have seen the crowd, got Jesus away before it was too late. And now he's been taken. We were here in the Garden of Gethsemane outside the city. It's full of olive trees. Some of them must be hundreds of years old. I know I was going to stay awake. The day had been long, and I've been thinking so much about what Jesus said. I found myself wondering whether in 1,000 or 2,000 years' time, some might sit beneath the very tree where I am. The next thing I knew was Jesus shaking James, John, and I awake. I'm sure we couldn't have been asleep that long. I was embarrassed and determined to keep watch with Jesus. As before, he went a little way off into the garden. I went in that direction, and I could hear him praying. I heard him call God, Abba, Father. That word Abba, I remember it was one of my first words. It conjured up that picture of me safe in my father's arms, laughing or being held when I'd fallen over, fished out of the lake when I fell in on my first fishing trip. And here was Jesus calling God by that intimate name. But Jesus was not laughing. I heard him say, all things are possible. Remove this cup from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want. I didn't understand what Jesus was saying, but I felt a cold dread clutch my heart, as though something bad was going to happen. And Jesus was asking God if there was any other way. And now it has happened, and I let it. I crept away from Jesus and went to sit down again, and then suddenly Jesus was shaking us awake. I felt so ashamed as he said to me, could you not keep awake 1 hour? I was determined not to let him down again, but like Jesus said, the spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. And despite my resolutions, I fell asleep. And when Jesus woke us, it was too late. A mob had come into the garden. Gethsemane was being invaded by the religious leaders and a crowd armed with swords and clubs. But what was even worse was at the head of them was Judas Iscariot, one of us, one of Jesus' closest friends, betraying him. Judas came forward. Rabbi, he announced, and kissed Jesus. This was clearly the signal, because immediately they laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. I tried to make up for my lack of watchfulness. I had a short sword under my cloak, and I struck it out. It hit the high priest's slave and chopped off his ear. I just stood there, rooted to the spot, holding the sword and looking at the blood, not really believing what I'd done. Suddenly Jesus was speaking. His words rang out, silencing the mob. Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching. You did not arrest me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled. That was enough for me. I felt sick and scared. I dropped the sword, and suddenly I, like the rest of the disciples, were running through the garden, determined to get away. I now must go back, find out what has happened, and this time I will stand by Jesus. I need to make up for what has happened so far tonight and show that despite it, I will still be Jesus' faithful follower when the cock crows in the morning. Love, Peter.